Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of My Life with Kenny Rogers. But let me reassure you, let me put you at ease. We're not going to talk about my life with Kenny Rogers, me, the lowly little John DePietro, but we're going to talk about the life with Kenny Rogers that our special guest has had with Kenny over the years. And his name, let's give him a welcome, is TG Engel. And TG, give yourself a round of applause.
How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. And I want to let people know that this is one of a series of several videos that we're doing with people who played an instrumental role. How's that, TJ? An instrumental
Yes.
role in the life and career of Kenny Rogers. And if you like this, down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little button that says subscribe. Hit that button. And then there's a bell that pops up. Hit the bell, and then every time we do a new one of these, and we've got several cool ones still planned, you'll be the first to get it. And you won't have to wait in line out in the cold. You won't have to wear gloves. You won't have to wear a mask or anything. But TG Engel is the name. Tell us about your time with Kenny, and tell us the years, how old you were, and that
Okay.
type of thing.
I didn't play a big role in his career, but he played a very big role in my career as a musician. I was 24 years old playing in a nightclub, and I had a friend by the name of Shug Baggett who owned I had worked for him over the years, owned a place called Possum Holler in Printers Alley, and George Jones used to play there all the time
This
when
is
he
in the
was
Nashville area?
oh, this is right downtown Nashville in
Downtown
Printers Alley,
Nashville. Okay.
the famous Printers Alley, right down the street from the Carousel Club and Boots Randolph's Club, famous Printers Alley, and Skull's Rainbow Room is right down there. So Sandy Baggett and his brother came to me one night when I was playing, and they said, "Hey, we just signed personal management with Kenny Rogers." I said, "Kenny Rogers? You mean Kenny Rogers of the first edition?" He said, "Yeah. He's going to put it together a new band, and it's going to be Kenny Rogers and the second edition."
Second
So I
edition.
had yeah, that's Kenny Rogers and the second edition. That was the original plan. And I was lucky enough to have played with some of Nashville's great musicians, Bobby Daniels, Gene Golden, and Steve Glassmeyer. They were we had split up and I was playing in different bands. So Kenny went to them and he hired them, and he came to me and he hired me. And I don't know the exact figures. I don't want to quote your figures, but the plan was all Suge had to do was get an amount of cash from the bank, and the figure that I heard was $100,000. How close that is, I don't know, but it was way up there. And this is 1975. That's when 100
Adjusted
grand
for
was.
inflation, of course.
Yes, and that was a whole lot of money.
Can
And
you come in a closer to your mic a little bit?
sure, and Kenny had moved
How
all
much?
of his household goods
There you go, much better.
in this giant trailer. I think it was Mayflower moving, because I remember Mayflower, and he had moved to Nashville because Suge was going to be his personal manager. Suge couldn't come up with the cash; the bank wouldn't give him the cash, and he would have owned a certain percentage for so many years, and it fell through. But Suge didn't get to be his manager, but I got the gig through Suge and Sandy Baggett, and he. This
Do you
is
recall
before.
roughly, TG, what years that was?
This is 1975.
Okay.
Because I remember the 76, the bicentennial, we were in Philadelphia.
Ah,
So
okay.
Lucille had not hit yet. And I used to play on a TV show playing classical guitar, and it was the Ray Walker show. Ray Walker was one of the Jordanaires.
Not
And I
Junior
guess,
Walker.
not Junior, that's Junior Walker on the All Stars, Shotgun.
Shoot 'em, boy, run now.
Run of Ray Walker's uh, cohorts in the Jordanaires invented this system of notation that's very famous, used around the world, called the Nashville number system. So I think I spent a little too much time practicing my guitar, and I wasn't conscious of what was going on. And I'd gotten through playing my guitar, and Ray Walker said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm playing with a singer named Kenny Rogers." And they all started laughing. Kenny Rogers? Well, of course we know Kenny Rogers, because he was known in the as the new up and coming country music artist, and he had out some wonderful country music songs. This is pre-Lucille.
Yep.
You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille.
Is
And
this
then
back when you were playing 2 or 3 sets a night at venues?
4 or 5 sets a night. It was just like one of those movies where the guy comes in and he says, "Hey kid, I'm going to make you a star." He came over to the club, heard me play. So the next thing I know, we're going to Lake Tahoe. That was our first gig to play at Harrah's, and then we went from there to Harrah's in Reno, and Glenn Campbell was in the next room. So we played that gig, and we played some other gigs, and I broke my shoulder the night before we were supposed to be on the Tonight Show. And I went home, and I was under a lot of medication. I was in really lots of trauma, lots of pain, had an operation.
Now, I think it's important to point out that you didn't break your shoulder by falling down a set of stairs at a hotel casino, right?
Skiing in Heavenly
Skiing.
Valley,
Okay.
right near where Sonny Bono also had his awful skiing accident. So
Okay.
I was excited about playing on the Tonight Show the next night, and I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. I was on shorty skis. I was going real fast, and all of a sudden I fell and hit my shoulder. So I couldn't play. So then Kenny calls me up about 2 months later, and he says, "Hey, do you want your job back?" I said, "Well, yeah, sure, I'd love that." So the first gig that we played after I came out of my operation was at the Exit Inn, a really famous venue here in Nashville. A wonderful place. I used to open for Dizzy Gillespie there. I
Oh, the
played,
jazz people. Yeah. Okay.
I played there with Odetta, and it's just a wonderful listening room. So I get to the Exit Inn after rehearsal, and there's a line around the block waiting to get in. I said, "What are all these people doing here?" I said, "Well," they said, "Well, TG, the record's out." I said, "What record?" They said, "Lucille." I said, "You mean that thing that you picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille? It's a hit." He said, "Yeah, it's a smash hit." And that's how out of it. Well, I'm not a drug taker, but these were all legal drugs. I mean, I was recuperating, so great. And then, man, oh man, oh man, everything just took off like a rocket.
Now,
And
who was in the band at
guys,
that time when you were playing that venue in Nashville? Can you recall?
Gene Golden, Bobby Daniels was on drums, and Steve Glassmeyer was on keyboards. We didn't have a bass player because Gene Golden he's just a musical genius. Most people when they learn a song, they'd have to write out the chords. He could listen to a song, not write down a thing, play it perfectly. 3 years later, ask him to play it again, no problem. He didn't have any problem with it.
So
And he
that was
also sang back.
before Randy, Chuck, and Steve.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, before
yeah.
Randy, Chuck, and Edgar,
Before
right?
Randy, Chuck, Edgar, and Rick Harper. Before
Rick
them.
Harper, that's right, right, right.
So
So that's
Gene was
interesting going
playing.
back. The interesting part about the whole Kenny series that I've been able to figure out, working with them, and I shouldn't say working with them, but following them for 35 years and then doing these videos for the past several years, is that Kenny was very, very rare in that there was very little personnel change within the
Yeah.
band. And, since the time that you've left the band and look at other acts, Kenny was really the
Yeah.
exception to the rule, wouldn't you say?
He was the exception, the rule, because he was a great guy to work for. And I don't think I made a mistake by leaving because I had been bitten by the classical guitar bug. There was a guitar player named Julian Bream who I really loved, and of course the great Andre Segovia. And I was so filled with that all the time. I sort of had one foot in two different worlds. But another reason none of the guys ever quit the band was when they get on stage, the sound. That's what I miss more than anything else besides the camaraderie and the guys. The sound of those voices. Kenny's voice with Bobby Daniels singing backup, Gene Golden, who has this tremendous, beautiful voice, and Steve Glassmeyer. So you listen to 4 singers on stage, and they sound just as good or even better than the studio. And that's what I miss the most.
And Steve had different color hair then, right?
He always had gray hair.
Oh,
Even
he
back then,
did.
even back then he
Oh,
had gray hair. Yeah.
okay. He's going to like hearing that. He's
And
going to like hearing that.
we didn't have a bass player because Gene, in those days, you had the Hammond B3 organ that everybody used. then through the new technology, you didn't have to have a big Hammond organ anymore. You could have these little portable jobs. And he had a little attachment called a Fender Cougar attachment that was about this long, and it stood on a stand, and the keyboard was about that big, and it played bass notes only. So Gene would play the bass with his left hand, and he would sing and play the organ with his right hand. And it was a wonderful sound. As a matter of fact, on some of the recordings we did with Kenny, I'm pretty sure it's Gene playing that key bass. So then, when I was still with the band, they hired Edgar Strubel, and Edgar added this dynamic swing feel to the band. We would call him Mr. Funk. He had a very strong background in rhythm and blues. Yeah. And rhythmically, the stuff he'd play on piano just really drove the band. It just really made the band just a rocking band. Just certainly one of the best, if not the best, one of the best bands ever to play in country music.
Mm. So at the time that you were doing the Kenny thing, I mean, Lucille had just hit. Had you started? You were still doing clubs, or had you started moving over into the arena world?
We were playing arena 1 week. Let me see. We would open for the Captain and Tennille. We opened for Dolly. We opened for, who are those guys who had a hummingbird humming on? Seals, not Seals and
Seals and Croft.
Yeah.
Seals and
but when we'd play these big venues, we were usually the opening act.
Opening act. You know, the story that I heard is that, and somebody said, yeah, but they're my friends, so don't really say it, but I said it anyway, is that with the Captain and Tennille people, they wouldn't let Kenny use their mics. Is there any, had you ever heard that story?
I'm staying out of that. I'm staying neutral. I have not heard that story, but wow.
Yep, that they wouldn't let Kenny use their mic. So Kenny opened for Dolly. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
As a matter of fact, we opened for Dolly the day that Elvis died.
77.
You talk about a really down audience, man. Everybody was like, "Hmm." And Kenny had told me, "Yeah, Elvis has been miserable for years." I'm going, "What? Elvis Presley? I didn't know that he was going through any depression or anything like that." But, yeah, that was a hard audience to play to. You know, the king.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So when you went from gig to gig, how did you travel? Were you in Greyhound buses? Were you in vans? Were you in, certainly not the tour buses, and the jet hadn't come yet, right?
This is way before the jet. We never used a tour bus either. We always flew commercial. But when we would play at Harrah's, or when we'd play at the Golden Nugget, when we'd play at the Golden Nugget downtown, Steve Wynn would loan Kenny his jet so we could fly to Burbank to do the Tonight Show. So we would we'd go do the Tonight Show, fly back to Burbank, and then we could sit in the break room with all the car dealers and the employees, personnel, and we could watch ourselves on the Tonight Show and impress all the girls. Hey, look at that up there. Who is that?
That's funny because they used to tape the Tonight Show at like 5 o'clock or so, right?
Right.
And, people would think that show was live, but it was never live. It was live to tape. And then
it was live at the time. I mean, there was no lip syncing on it. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you something else about the Tonight Show. They had a censor, and the censor, the reason we remember, he looked just like Bobby Kennedy. And if anybody said the S word, the N word, the H word, or damn, or anything like that, he would cut it off with with the delay. And I mean, there was no swearing. And the way, can you imagine being 25 years old, sitting with the Tonight Show band, the greatest musicians in the world, and you wouldn't believe how good they sound in person. And
was Doc Severinsen there at the time?
He was. Doc Severinsen was the band leader. Really nice guys too.
And that was a pretty big venue out in Burbank, if I remember being there. I saw it when Jay Leno was there. I don't know if they changed studios or not.
The studio was tiny. I couldn't believe how little it was. It looked so big on TV, but it's very small.
Yeah. So was this before Kenny was guest hosting the Tonight Show?
Yes. This was a full year and a half before he was guest hosting. He was just getting rolling. And I knew that if I didn't leave right then, that I would never learn to play classical guitar because it takes so much time and so much practice. So I know it cost me a whole lot of money. And I just I wanted to do other things, but playing with someone of a musician of that caliber, he taught me so many things about it's not how fast you can play, it's the feel. Because I was young and I tried to play too many notes, and he taught me a whole lot.
Uh, so was there anything that you saw, again, 25 years old, and when you're in the music
Yeah,
business, you're not really thinking business and that type of thing. You're looking, where can we play, or where's the
yeah,
party after, I guess. I don't know. I could be totally wrong
yeah.
on that. But was there anything you saw in Kenny that you said, there's something special, not necessarily the music part, but the
Mm.
business part of the music?
Yes. Um, Whenever we'd do a gig, we'd fly to the next gig on a commercial airplane and commercial airline, and he always had a little calculator there, and he was totaling up the day's receipts and how much money was going in and how much money was going out. And he would talk about, especially he would talk about Don Henley, and he said, "I knew the Eagles were going to make it by the kinds of questions they asked." So the kind of questions that you ask tells a lot about where you're headed in the business. And
Hmm.
I guess, so he was very much that person. He was always focused on the music. Uh, he didn't drink, no drugs, and he was engaged to Mary Ann at the time. They had not yet married yet, and there was no fooling around with the ladies or anything like that. But he had a fun time. He was always in a good mood, very professional. So yes, you could see that he was always on time. Um, all the time that I played with him, I never heard him sing one note sharp, one note flat. He was always right on pitch, always on time. Every performance was just as good as the last performance. It was 100% every time. Plus, he
And
was relaxed about it.
but he wasn't, how do I say this the right way? He wasn't a perfectionist that would yell at a band member if they missed a note, right?
He got on me once. I thought I was going to get fired. He did this thing where during the concert, I had to walk up and hand him his guitar.
Yeah.
And he would say to the whole, something, we're starting to get big gigs, and a few thousand people out there. Hey, this is my guitar butler over here. Ho, ho, ho. So I said, Kenny, I'm not going to hand you your guitar anymore, man. That's embarrassing. And he got really mad, but
You said
one of
that
the other band guys do it.
during the show or after the
No,
show?
no, this is off stage. This is
Oh,
after the show. But I mean, in front of him. But no, when we deserved to get, he never yelled at a band member. When he'd turn around and he didn't like something, he'd say, "I'd like that." But no, he would never yell at
embarrassed.
someone on stage and embarrass him. He was a really good boss. Let me put it that way.
What do you mean by
Didn't
that?
have the big ego.
Explain that.
He was a good. He was even tempered. We didn't have to worry about, oh my gosh, is Kenny going to blow up? He's not one of these. He was not temperamental. He was very even keel. If he was mad at you, he would let you know, and you could talk it out with him. There'd be a good reason
And then it
for
was
him to be
done.
mad. Yeah, he was not the temperamental, artistic type about, oh, my art, and you. Yeah, he was never like that. He was a nice guy to be around.
Yep. How
Always
about the
up to very bright.
how about the craziest memories of either before a show or after a show or during a show that never showed up in any reviews, or stuff that you knew happened but the public didn't know that happened?
I don't know if the statute of limitations has run out yet. Uh, and plus, let me say, I'm married now, so I don't think my wife would want to hear. But he never did any crazy stuff like any of the rock and roll stuff. No, no.
Oh, I don't mean that way. I don't
Uh,
mean I
uh,
don't mean that you don't want anybody to know about, but the band gear didn't show up, or the microphone, like Gene Roy told me. You never worked with Gene Roy. You were there long before Gene Roy, right?
yeah.
Gene Roy told me when Kenny was opening American Idol, it's probably 10 years or so ago, a minute before, of course, that show was live,
Uh huh.
somebody dropped the microphone with a minute to
And it wouldn't
go.
work. Ah,
And, they scrambled and they got the mic and they gave the Kenny the mic 1 second before they said, Kenny Rogers. And he just went right out there like there was nothing.
yeah, I'm sure he did. He didn't get stage fright, didn't get foozled. He never forgot lyrics. The lyrics are real important in all of his songs, but he nailed all the lyrics. I will tell you something else. My favorite thing that I liked hearing with Kenny more than anything else, Kenny sitting on the stool, playing the guitar and singing, just all by himself, just great,
Like
just
Sweet
great.
Music Man.
Yes, exactly like Sweet Music Man. Yeah, I
Was that
played
the one that you
on
had to
that
handle the
recording.
guitar for?
I think it was. I think you're right.
Because he'd pull out a
And
little bar stool, right?
yeah, yeah,
Sit on the bar
yeah.
stool and the, now
I
were you
bought
guys
a. Go
you
ahead.
guys weren't in the pit or anything then? You were on stage with him?
Oh no, this is way before the pit.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you look at the midnight special, they set me up sitting right next to him, and I didn't want to sit right next to him. I wanted to sit back because they didn't come to see me; they came to see Kenny. But yeah, we were all on stage. Now I bought a really beautiful and expensive handmade guitar called Ruck. Robert Ruck was a very famous maker of classical guitars, with nylon strings, no electronics. And Kenny really liked it, so he went out and bought himself one too. And that Ruck is what he used to play on Sweet Music Man.
Was it the white one?
No, it was. I'll show you. It looked exactly like this one.
Okay. Looks like Billy Dean's guitar.
Yeah. And the sound of that Ruck. And another thing in the studio, we would record and I'd look around and I'd go, who else is singing? I thought someone was singing along with him. His voice was so full and he would just nail it in the studio. He was just right on the money.
Now, in this world of Zoom, it's nice to see that when you got up to get that guitar, you actually had pants on.
Well, I'm wearing pajamas.
But you hit 70, right?
I am. I am 70 years old.
Okay, so even though we're taping this at 7 o'clock Nashville time, bedtime can't be too far away.
That's right.
Yeah.
We got together, some of Kenny's band members, Gene Golden, Bobby Daniels, and I guess this was about 17 years ago, went and played for my brother's wedding. We all flew from Nashville out to Newport Beach to play for his wedding. And Gene and I were talking, and he said, is there life after Kenny? And I said, no. It's such a big experience. It's sort of like, when guys go to Vietnam, it's such a big experience for them. It stays in your head all the time.
And
And
it's been what, 50 years since you,
yeah, yeah. And you can either
40
let it
years.
torment you, or you can say, "Well, gosh, that was a good thing that happened, and my life is different, and I'm gonna move on," and that sort of stuff.
Mm. I noticed I remember when we talked earlier this afternoon, you had said at one time you were filling out a resume or something to go
Yeah,
to graduate school or something, and on your resume it said Kenny Rogers and had the dates, and
yeah.
people were questioning you.
They weren't
What?
questioning. It was to teach a commercial at a. I taught at I was a professor at Martin Methodist College for about 15 years, and then I taught in the Middle East. I taught in Japan. I taught in Korea. And they wanted to know if I had any experience playing music. I said, yeah, I used to play with Kenny Rogers, and they laughed. Yeah. And before I even met Gene and those guys, there's what the great all-time drummers in Nashville is a guy named Eddie Bears. And I mentioned to someone I used to be in a band with Eddie Bears, and they laughed at me. This guy's telling stories. But anyway, luckily, there's a video of me playing on the Midnight Special with Kenny, and I send that out in the world with all my resumes because no one would believe me.
And it was long enough ago that they could still recognize you.
No, they could a little. I had real long hair,
Long
and
hair.
yeah, and I would, as a matter of fact, when I would teach elementary school, I'd play it for the children, And I'd say, this guy's a famous singer. His name is Kenny Rogers. And who is that playing the guitar? And they just can't believe it. They just,
Yeah. Did you ever see, I mean, you've always lived around Nashville? You always stayed around that area?
yes.
No, you've been all over the place, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
Like you said. But have you ever seen anybody that has been able to replicate Kenny's career with the longevity and the time at the top?
Well, I have been out of the business for so long. I'm not an expert on the business, but someone who had that, I've seen a lot of them come and go, and they'll make a whole lot of money and then get out of it. But he stayed for year after year after year, and he kept his voice too, and he didn't smoke. I think that helped a lot.
To keep your
And
voice.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's and another thing when we would, you know how you would hear a record by some singer and then you hear them on TV and they just sound awful. We would play on TV and he would sound great. As a matter of fact, he used to play. I got him to play on a local show with me called The Noon Show with Teddy Bart. This was years ago, playing on local Nashville television, and he sounded great. He always sounds good, whatever the venue is. I mean, I guess that's called talent.
Yeah, or professionalism or whatever the case,
Yeah.
because you in all the years that I saw him, you never saw him walk through a show. He
Oh no.
always,
Yeah.
like some people can walk through a
Yeah.
show and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
get rid of the songs and get out of there. But the band was saying last week when we did an interview with Chuck and Randy, because the band is back together again doing
Right.
some
I bet
tribute.
they sound good.
Yeah, they sound phenomenal. They said the thing with Kenny is that a lot of performers who've been around that long like to deviate from their normal set list and have a different set list every night. But Kenny was smart enough to realize that the people that are spending their hard-earned money on that ticket,
Right. Right.
they want to hear
Right.
the hits. And they don't want to
Right.
hear a studio version. They want to hear the 45 version, the radio station version.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
Did you guys notice that was, I mean, was he consistent every night?
He was always tremendously consistent. But even though he was singing the same notes, each performance was unique and different. Although he didn't change
Yeah.
the lyrics and he gave us pretty much freedom I wanted to play.
How about interaction with the audience?
Oh yeah, I mean, once the reason he had such a connection with the audience was that voice of his, the artistry, the music, the feeling, the passion. And as soon as he'd sing one note, he was connected. He was locked in with that audience. I've never seen anything like it, and I've never. And to be real honest with you, the guys in the band had a lot to do with it too, because we had those three singers singing behind him: Bobby, Gene, and Steve Glassmeyer. And when the four of them would sing and they'd break out in that harmony, it was something to behold.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever look back and say, do you ever look back like 20 years after you left and say, you know what, I wish I stayed? You ever had that
Every
thought
day.
go through your mind?
Every day.
Every
Yes,
day.
every day. Yeah, but then I realized that I would never have gotten. I got a scholarship to Vanderbilt and a scholarship to Indiana, and got my doctorate in music, and I played all over the world playing classical guitar. I'd never be able to play like that if I'd stayed with Kenny, just because there wouldn't be time to practice. Plus, another reason I left was that the guys in the band were self-taught. So I had to go to music school for years to learn all the stuff that they already knew that they had taught themselves.
Oh, that's very interesting. So
Yeah.
you're a schooled musician, as
Right.
opposed to somebody who can just sit down on a piano and play a song or pick up a guitar.
Right. There's no substitute for talent. They did it with pure talent. So I went to school to do it, which still left me a little behind, but at least I learned it. And then I was able to use that knowledge to incorporate it into my playing.
Now, behind you, I see at least 3 guitars. I'm
Oh
presuming
yeah.
you're still actively involved
Oh,
in the
all the
music
time.
world.
I'm trying to get into the K-pop now. I went to Korea and wrote an arrangement that sold pretty well of K-pop songs. If you're familiar
Yes,
with K-pop.
describe that to our
K-pop.
audience. Describe that to
Uh,
our audience, what it is.
K-pop, when it started off, it was just like American rock and roll, but they would sing in Korean. So I taught at Page University for a year. I was a visiting scholar,
Scholar, yep.
and and I would explain to Koreans, how rock and roll started. It didn't start with Elvis. It actually started in the African American church service during slavery. And that's where all your blues comes from, all of your jazz, all of your rock and roll, and even country music came out of that worship service. Anyway, that's a whole thing. So K-pop is popular music that started in Korea, and they started to get real good at it. They would imitate Bob Dylan, and then they would go off on their own and they'd sing Korean-style rock and roll. Then they started to get these boy bands, good-looking young boys who would sing and they would dance, and they're just absolutely the rage. There's this group called BTS, and my teenage daughter is just crazy about them. And they sold out Wembley Stadium twice, quicker than the Beatles did.
In London.
And I just found out. I mean, I've been living in Nashville since '68, and most of the K-pop is recorded right here in Nashville. I didn't even know that. I'm still trying to figure out why they come from Korea to go to Nashville to record, and I'm trying to get in on that scene.
Oh, nice. So you're not slowing down, just like Kenny. Kenny didn't want to quit. I mean, we were just talking 2 weeks ago, that last show, or a week ago, that last show was December 17th, 2017. And we were talking about the night of the last show with Chuck and Randy and Gene Sisk and a couple other, and Mike Zimmerman. None of them taking that bus ride home from Glens Falls, New York to Nashville at 20 hours on I-81. They all thought they'd be back in the spring when Kenny was supposed to be back in the spring. So it wasn't really Kenny's plan to retire.
Yeah, there's a story, but I've heard that same story that they didn't know, but and I don't want to get into their business or get into any gossip or anything like that, but I've heard that it was a shock that he wasn't playing anymore.
Well, I went to that show and took a ton of video because I knew in my gut that there's no way that the poor guy his mobility was reduced to sitting on a stool during the show.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yep. Like the last year or so, it was a bar stool, a high stool with a back on it and everything. And I said, you know what, let's catch some video because this is going to be historical sometime. And, when the show was over, everybody said, hey, Merry Christmas, everybody. We'll see you in March, because they had some dates booked for March.
Really?
Kenny was supposed to do some type of, have some type of procedure done in January and then recuperate a little bit. And then, they said they found out on the radio.
There's something else about Kenny, about his makeup. He had tremendous respect for great singers. There was a blind musician he used to play with named Bobby Doyle, and the way Kenny would talk about him, you could tell that he just thought this guy hung the moon. Kenny Doyle taught him a lot about the business, a lot about singing, and Kenny had a nightclub in Houston where Tony Bennett used to come sit in with him, and when he would talk about it, he was talking about it just like a little kid coming in. He was just like a little kid when Tony Bennett was around, he said.
At Bobby
Just
Doyle.
the sound of his voice. Yeah. Bobby, Kenny was talking about when Tony Bennett would come and sit in with him. It was like the greatest moment in his life. So he learned a lot by listening to other artists. He had great respect for.
Well, one of the interesting stories that Kenny tells during the show, especially during the farewell tour, there was a picture of the album, of the Bobby Doyle album or the group.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Really?
And he said, the guy in the middle, somebody said, well, why is that guy not looking at the camera? And Kenny said, well, he's the blind guy. He didn't know where to look, and we didn't tell him. So I think there were 4 people, right? 4 4 people and Kenny, or 3, Kenny plus 3 or whatever it was, but
Yeah.
2 of them are looking at the camera and Bobby wasn't. So, you know, it's funny from that aspect of it. But when you saw the fact that he was like the Energizer Bunny, I mean, he would do 2 weeks in Australia, then fly back here, and on the next day do a show in the U.S., which I thought was amazing. And he was already in his 70s then.
Yeah, it's a lot easier when you can fly.
Oh yeah.
And I left before we did the private jet thing.
But flying from Australia back
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then playing in North Carolina,
yeah.
I'm
That's
saying,
pretty tough.
oh, how
Well,
does he do it?
it's the music that energizes you. You just live through the music. It's a source of power.
Yep. So what would you want to say to the guys in the band, or to the fans out there that are, you know, they'll be watching this video?
Uh,
How could you summarize, quote unquote, my life with Kenny Rogers?
Guys in the band, I sure do miss you guys. I'm glad you were all so successful, and I have nothing but really great memories, fond memories, and it was quite an experience to work with great musicians like that and work with a great singer like Kenny. I feel that I was very lucky to have gotten that gig from when I did, and I feel very positive about the whole thing.
Great.
And it made
Thanks.
me very modest too.
What was that, please?
It made me very modest
There
as
you go.
well.
What do you mean
Yeah.
by that?
Well, they were so far ahead of me at the time. I didn't realize how far ahead of me they were musically. I was too young to realize it. I was sort of wrapped up in myself. And there was one of the great jazz guitar players who ever lived was a Canadian guy by the name of Lenny Breau. And to tell you how good he was, when I went to Berklee School of Music to study jazz, we studied
In
Lenny.
Boston.
Yeah, in Boston. He was on our final exam. And Kenny would tell the story about when he had his television show up in Canada called Rolling on the River, I believe. And
Yep.
Paul Simon was on there, and Lenny Breau was supposed to show up, but he never showed up. So that was 4 years before. So we're playing that gig at the Exit Inn, and we're on break. We're getting ready to go on stage. Lenny Breau walks in. He looks at Kenny and said, "Sorry, man, something came up." just like,
Oh, that's
just
fun.
like, you know.
You were when we talked briefly this afternoon, it should be said that we've never met in person. We talked on the phone, and I said, "Hey, let's do this gig," because so many other people said you got to talk to TG. Um, Tell me about the story of where Jimi Hendrix, that included Jimi Hendrix. Does that include Kenny, or is that just a sidebar with Aretha?
It's a sidebar, but these are some of the influences we had as kids. Gene Golden must have been 15 or 16 years old and was signed to Acuff Rhodes Records. This is before I even knew Gene. As a songwriter, at a young age, he was very, very.
Oh, that's right.
just off
Acuff
the
Rose.
charts.
Okay. Yep.
Acuff Rhodes, as in Roy Acuff.
Yep.
So they gave him a demo tape. Back then it was big reel-to-reel tapes. This was even before they had cassettes, way before they had CDs. So this had to have been like 1965. And they gave him this demo, and they said, "Listen, down at the Modern Era Club on Jefferson Street, it's either Jefferson Street or Charlotte, I'm not sure. I want you to go down there, and I want you to give this tape to the singer. She's really good, and see if she'll sing it and come in and record it." And the song was "Son of a Preacher Man."
Son of a
So
preacher
he
man. Okay,
goes
your
down,
voice went out. Your sound went off a little bit.
"Son of a Preacher Man."
Yep. There we go.
So Gene goes down there, and he gives it to them, gives it to the girl singer, and she was really good. And she goes, "Man, that's a great song, but I can't sing that. My daddy's a preacher." And, it has overtones about sex. The only one who could ever reach me, the only one. The son of the preacher man taught this girl more than God, if you know what I mean. I don't need to draw a picture, right? So she says, "Man, I can't record it, but tell him it's a great song. I can't record it." The singer was Aretha Franklin. Gene also noticed this left-handed guitar player in the band who was really good. It was Jimi Hendrix. So
In the band.
in the band, because Hendrix was in the 101st Airborne in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, And when he was discharged from the Army, he came to Nashville, and he played with a lot of national musicians, and just exploded on the scene very quickly. But back in those days in Nashville, there were just so many. You would go into the Holiday Inn, or you'd go into any club, and you could hear Lenny Bro used to live here in town, and it was just everyone would hang out at the Exit Inn. I was telling you, I used to open for Dizzy Gillespie at the Exit Inn, and every musician in town would be there. It was just a mecca for music making, and everybody was really supportive. And that's the culture, the background of what we grew up in Nashville.
Yeah. Wow. Wild stories. Wild
Yeah.
stories. We want to thank you so much for joining us and let you know that you've been watching another segment of My Life with Kenny Rogers, tonight featuring TG Engel. And folks, if you enjoy this, down at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little button that says subscribe. Hit that button, and then all the new ones that are coming up, you'll get. But also look back. I mean, we've got about 30 of these right now with so many of the members. We have a Bobby Daniels one. We have a, Steve Glassmeyer. We have Randy. We have Chuck Jacobs and a whole bunch of people from the Christmas tours. And everybody, Mr. Engel, very similar to what you said. They all felt the same way about Kenny. And you know what? We thank you so much for sharing your time with us on My Life with Kenny Rogers.
Thank you. Miss you guys, and had a great time playing with you. Wish you all the best with your new venture.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.